in this episode, possibly really the last in this series, I'm going to complete the application with an extension of using Mobex. The lit, so if you remember all of my recent activities about to use web components with lit, and then Mobex works excellently with lit, especially with the help of a lit Mobex package, and these two together is awesome for application level state management. The application I have been working with for a while now has, give me a second, this is the lit timer, and then it's, let's have a look at the index.html. so my element is the application, my element is the application level component, web component, and this is the implementation. We worked with quite a lot with it, and then within this component we are using slots. I'm using slots here in this example. I've explained them a lot, and also another web component I have been creating and experimenting with. This is the my timer, and I explained it a lot. And then here the job is to control this my timer objects from within the my element, or even when you have any of these timer components outside of the my element. So any timer in this case, in this regard, let's check out. This is the application running. Let me just add a my timer outside the my element, say somewhere here, Control S. Okay, let me just make it bigger. So we have here another timer. So we have quite a number of timer. These timers are within, under the my elements, either slotted, or there is one directly included in the shadow DOM. The others are coming into the slot. And so that's the situation. And what I'd love to do, and I want to show how to do it, how to stop these timers and how to control stop and start this timer using Mobex application. The click count works fine. Why works fine? Because this has its own count property, which is also an internal or external state. So therefore this video is not about the counter, but of course the counter works fine. Let's see what my timer is doing at the moment. This my timer has a count up iterator generator that yields every 100 millisecond a value. This is actually the time in milliseconds since this timer has been started. And this uses an internal state, and this is the count up. So it just runs and runs practically forever, and it has also slots. I have already explained them. So that's the initial setup. So we have it doesn't have any control, it doesn't have any properties. So if you remember my previous videos, I removed every properties. So the default action is this timer start immediately, and then of course the stop is doing nothing at the moment. So how to change this application using Mobex to be controllable, these timers be controllable from this my element stop button. So the first thing is definitely we have to import npm import Mobex and Adobe Lit Mobex. These are the tools I'm talking about. Mobex is a well-known state management application. It is quite popular together with React, but it works standalone. It's just one integration with React, possibly the most popular today, but it also works excellently with Lit standalone, or also Lit Mobex provides a couple of functions that are also very useful when integrating with Lit, and I will explain what are these. So that's the first step, just to import Mobex and Adobe Lit Mobex. When not import, sorry, install. So install, and then when installed, let's come to the my timer. When installed in my timer, I'm going to create a time controller. This time controller is a object, a class that has a couple of state variables. Check out how to do it. First, let's import both the Mobex. From Mobex, import the make auto observable, reaction, or auto run. I will explain both of them. We don't need both reaction or auto run. One of them is enough, but I am going to show how to use each of them. Both could work completely fine for our purpose, but we don't need both. Then we have the Mobex reaction update, which I prefer to use, and this is imported from the Adobe Lit Mobex package. And then check out this time controller class. It has a run member variable. I declared it private. The reason I declared it private, because in Mobex the idea is that of course you can access the internal attributes, but you are not allowed to modify them. So that's why I decided if just to prevent any way that is modifiability, I hidden this internal member variable, which is made automatically observable. This is the only function that we have to call when creating a store. It is called store an application state component. That is every variable, I mean member variable or member data element would be made automatically a observable, and also these are the accessors functions for them. So these make auto observable should be invoked in the constructor. So I created a getter, a public getter, which returns simply this run This is just a Boolean value. And then I've defined two action functions, the start, which simply sets the run to true, and the stop, which sets run to false. That's so easy. And then I'm exporting. So I make an instance and exporting it. So this way, this is really a kind of global variable, a global controller, which is available for the rest of the application, whoever wants to control the timers. So when we have these when we have these in place, then the next step to start using them. The first thing is that this count up, to make it stoppable, that's the first thing. Instead of replace this true with the time controller dot run. That is, this iterator generator runs while the time controller is the status is run. That's quite straightforward. And the next very important thing is that whenever the state is changed here, we have to initialize or reinitialize, restart. So this iterator generator, why is it needed? Because this is just a function. The real iterator is this timer. So this timer is generated when the whole class is created, instantiated. Then this function, this countup function, generates an object, and that object is the timer object, and that is the object that actually is running this, however running. But when this function is completed, the whole timer is done. It's very similar to the concept of a promise. So therefore, if once this generator is stopped, the only thing, and that object cannot be restarted again, so the only thing you can do to restart is to create another object. Let's just use this auto run for now. And then this auto run, is another function that is invoked when this timer is connected. And then let's create then here an auto run kind of instance, or a listener, or whatever it is called. I don't know what is the background implementation, very finicky and quite tricky, possibly because this is a global function. I'm pretty sure that behind the scene it maintains a global repository of these listeners and observers and all the machinery. So in this MobX space we are creating then a machinery. Whenever any property is changed here, actually in our case we have only one, this is the run, but it could have be any number. For a complex application it could have any number of member variable, and because they are auto observable, all of the changes whenever the start or stop is called, this is changed, and then it automatically executes this function. This is a kind of listener. This is what we could even call it a listener, a change listener for the MobX store, this application, this call, because whenever this timer controller dot run Okay, so whenever there is a change, this lambda function is called, and then this lambda function does two things. So it checks if it is run, and if this is run, it is changed to run, then definitely we reinitialize here. I'm reinitializing here this timer object, and then when it is reinitialized, it automatically also starts up the counter. It just starts running, and it is running while the timer controller is is returns true. Otherwise we don't do anything. So this is, of course, this is absolutely not a kosher TypeScript code, but Java, in JavaScript that's okay. And it looks a bit stupid here because we are not returning any value. We just simply wanted to call, yeah, this is a one-liner. Anyhow, so this is the almost everything that we should do. However, there is also an important thing, is that let's just change it to see if it it worked great. So all of them, what I'm thinking, what I was the timer controller is not needed here, of course. I don't know why it is here. No, we don't need this. What I was thinking, that we might not need this MobX reaction update for lit element, because when I check out the rendering function, I don't see any reference to the time controller. So when there is not a reference in your render to the time controller, then you don't really need to derive, but we will see later. So what I can see, that this timer runs perfectly fine. Of course it cannot be stopped because this is only one part. However, what we can immediately test, if I change this run to false as initial, Control S, here you go, the time controller default is false. Of course at the moment nothing changes it to true, but it works that all of the timer stopped, they are not started. So let's just change it back to true, and the timers are restarted immediately. So that was the first part. Let's go over to the second part, the my element. This my element has the stop button here. If we want to use this timer controller, because this is what we want to use when the stop button is called, we want to call start and stop, because then it changes the internal variable, and as we've seen, the timers, all of the timers are listening to this variable, and then it's reinitialized with the autorun because of side effects. Normally autorun is not required. The reason it requires, because our implementation of the count of the way it should be done. For example, this autorun could also be required, say, if we want to request the data with a remote HTTP request. So yes, these are what we call side effect functions, and this is a side effect function, and when you have a side effect function you can use either autorun or reaction. The reaction is exactly the same, but it provides a finer granularity. But for this demonstration, autorun is totally fine. Therefore, coming back to the my element, and here is our button, And what we could do when this stop is displayed, first we have to import the time controller. When the time controller is imported, then the next step is that, let me just copy it from here, I don't want to spend too much time on typing. That is, whenever this if the time controller is running, then of course this button should provide us the possibility to stop it. Otherwise it is just run or start. So let's just, so far so good, so it displays stop. But of course it doesn't do anything at the moment because the click function is not implemented. And then let me just implement the click function with again a one-liner, which we love so much. Time controller. So when the time controller is running, then let's call the time controller stop. Otherwise, just call time controller start. Control S. Here you go, and check out what's happening. Bang! Cool. The timers have been stopped. And when I press the button, they are restarted again. Stop. Whoa! However, one thing we can recognize that there is an issue here. The stop value is not changed. And then, as I explained a moment ago, that when you check your render function, and if you can find in the display any reference of the timer of a Mobex store, and in this case I have it here, because that is my application is displays the button labels. Are dependent on the controller, the Mobex store. In that case we should use the Mobex reaction update, and to be able to use Mobex reaction update, and this Mobex reaction update is imported from the Adobe Lit Mobex. So that's the only situation where we need it. Control S, check out. When I press stop, oops, it changes back to run and it is really stopped. And when I press stop, when I press run, they are started from scratch. Run, stop, run, stop. So, my friends, that was all. How to modify and change a application with brutally simple. So this Mobex is amazing, especially together with Lit. And of course, just keep in mind this Mobex is mostly for application developers. This is an application when you are building your own machinery, a standard class library for web components, reusable, and you don't want to make your application dependent on Mobex, therefore you don't need it. But this is the level. What I am doing now here is the application level programming. So yeah, just enjoy. We don't need also this. I want just to clean up. Yeah, of course, the click count just works as usual. Stop, stop, run, stop. Doesn't matter, of course. And then we can add any number of timers here. We don't need these IDs anymore. I used it during some of my, let's just copy one more timer, Control S. Here you go, and then you have any number of timers, and for the sake of fun, let's just do copy paste all of these together. Again, Control S, and here you go, all of your many number of timers. You stop them all, restart them all, stop them all, restart them all, and why you can use click count. Of course, I could have modified and I could have also included the count. Just remember, we have here a state property which is the count. Of course, it's that easy. Just move this property over to the application, over to the Mobex store. But in our case, this is totally meaningless. The reason is that when you have a local property, a local state, why the hell would you move it over to a global store? So this global store is really meant and to be used for situations where you have a number of competing and collaborating web components or any components of your application. And of course, this is also very interesting that my timer, because it is not dependent of its display, is not dependent of the time controller, that is the Mobex. Therefore, it's not necessary. So let's just clean it up. Again, we don't need it. Here you go. So, my friends, that was it. I think that was the kind of conclusion, the hottest topic of using Mobex together with Lit for controlling cooperating web components.